Welcome to part 4, is it, of the Drought Speaker Series. We're thrilled to see everyone. It's been a real wild ride that we've been on, and excited to hear what you've been thinking about the series so far. We have been taking collaborative notes so far, and a humongous thanks to the Climate Center junior researchers who've been holding the bar. But if you would like to contribute to the notes or catch up on the previous sessions, we're going to post a link in the chat as soon as I can find it. And please do contribute or follow along as well. And great to see so many different people as well, names that I don't necessarily recognize, and people from organizations that I don't think have worked on drought anticipatory action before. So brilliant to have you, and looking forward to hearing your questions and your thoughts about all this. For those of you just joining, so the Drought Speaker Series was launched by, it's a collaboration by German Red Cross Climate Center, IFRC, and the Anticipation Hub. IFRC is very kindly providing translation services. So if anyone wants to be talking in French or in Spanish, you can tune in to, I think it's the interpretation bottom on the side. And I'll post the instructions in French and Spanish in just a little while so everyone can follow as well. But we're very grateful to IFRC for allowing this multilingual presentations to happen. It's really great to have this. I'll hand over to Karen maybe to tell us a little bit more about the series, and please do make liberal use of the chat, everyone. I'm seeing the people's names and organizations coming in, which is really great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, and welcome everyone. Very great to see you. So yeah, what is on this series? So as Dorothy has said, we are in the fourth part of our 8-part series on drought, on our drought learning series. So we started off in the middle of February with one of the big picture sessions where we try to understand drought as a humanitarian issue. So how is that a humanitarian issue? And what is also the role of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent in this, in this humanitarian issue? How can we address it? What is our role? And how do we conceptualize drought as humanitarian actors in general? And that's what we went on doing in the first part of the, in the first chunk, so to say, in the understanding drought risks. So we, beginning of March, we tried to understand drought as a hazard and its impacts. So we try to understand better what is that hazard, when is it a hazard, and what are the impacts and what are the timelines between the different impacts. Before we then, in the last session 2 weeks ago, try to understand better the underlying risk factors of drought. So here we try to look at, okay, what are the vulnerabilities that make people susceptible to drought? Who and what is exposed? So Kenya Red Cross explained us how they conceptualized drought risk in their drought EAP. And today we are in the first session on forecasting drought. So the next 2 sessions will look into drought forecasting. And so we will get a bit more technical, let's say, on the forecasting and trigger side for anticipatory action. Before in the end of April, beginning of May, we will look into the early actions of drought, here trying to understand what are the theories of change for drought early action. So what can we do when to actually reduce the impact of drought? And as cash is one of the modalities that we use a lot in early action protocols, we will have a dedicated session on cash-based actions for drought, before we then wrap up end of May with, again, one of those big picture overarching sessions where we want to understand compound risk a little bit better, and also look into what are the effects of climate change on drought. Again, I think most of you have registered already for the sessions 3 to 8. This is one link now. So if you haven't done, you have received it from a colleague, you can still register. And if there's any comments, feedbacks that you have on the series, please reach out to us, either to me, Karen Dahl from the German Red Cross, or to Gigma or Dorothy from the Climate Center. So yeah, that's what's on. Where's my mouse? Here we are. And I'll hand over to Dorothy to walk us through a bit of housekeeping.
Realized I probably should have introduced myself before starting. Everyone, my name is Dorothy Heinrich. I'm a technical advisor at the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. I think I recognize many names, but for those of you I don't know, great to have you. Yeah, just a bit of housekeeping before we get started on the content, which I know everyone's excited to discuss. So the sessions are officially an hour. We have up until, an hour from now to basically discuss kind of more formally. There'll be some presentations. You'll have a chance to ask kind of more technical questions and kind of start getting a feel a little bit for, in this session, the topic of forecasts and tools for anticipating droughts. But then we realized that an hour wasn't enough, and often people want to stay on and are keen for further conversations, sometimes about possibly more contentious topics or things or just kind of questions that people might have and want to stay on. So we've actually extended these Zoom rooms by a half hour for more informal conversations. So if you do want to stick around at the end and kind of talk with the presenters, talk amongst each other, we can make breakout groups, we can kind of facilitate this type of conversation. As we're hosted very kindly by the Anticipation Hub, which is also a space for this kind of dialogue, we wanted to make sure that this was a space that we were opening for you as well. You've already started doing this, but please do make liberal use of the Zoom chat. We're monitoring it, a couple of us, and so if you have any questions or things that aren't working or anything that you'd like to contribute, resources or anything, we'd highly encourage you to make use of it as much as possible. There'll be moments in the session as well for you to put your hands up and ask questions out loud if you'd prefer. But the Zoom room, the Zoom chat is really your space at the moment for kind of just letting us know what you're thinking. There's also going to be a Slido, I think, in this session as well. We've been using it, it's been working quite well. We've been kind of gathering people's questions because the idea at the end of this 8-part series is that we're also going to consolidate a lot of the questions that people have, a lot of the topic, some gaps maybe that we haven't been addressing properly. So the Slido is also there as a resource for future conversations. For those of you doing research, it might be a nice resource as well. So we're going to make the Slido available as well. And then I've made the spiel about the collaborative notes again. And the French and English translation, French and English translation, French and Spanish translation. If anyone has a difficulty accessing it, just put your hand up and I'll chat with you separately and we can let you know how to access those. But thanks again to our wonderful group of translators who are here as well. I think that's it for the housekeeping, Karen. We could maybe start talking about the topic of the day, which is, I'm sure, a burning question on everyone's mind. So the topic of the day is forecasts. And as most of you who work currently in anticipatory action or have some sort of knowledge of the topic in general, forecasts and hazard monitors are the fundamental tool in which a lot of these programs are built. So the idea is we want to use the best of predictive sciences to allow us to take humanitarian decisions in advance. This is for a range of hazards. For drought, the forecasting and kind of the monitoring has a whole range of dimensions, which we're going to mention briefly today, and we'll share a lot of resources as well to help you kind of explore more about the topic. And my colleague Gigma is here as well, I think, or I hope, and might be able to tell us a bit more about why are forecasts important. This is our first session about forecasts, so why is it important that we're talking about this? Why is it particularly technical? Why can it be tricky? What are some of the key questions that we come across when we're talking about drought forecasting? And what can people expect during the session? Gigma, could I hand over to you?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear and see me from the funny place where I'm
Perfectly.
seated?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I'm just sitting under a tree in Burkina. Yeah. So hi, everyone. Nice to be with you, all of you again today. I think that we are midway in our journey on the Drought Learning Series. It is a really great pleasure that midway we start now thinking about, I would say, one of the most important aspects of drought, of anticipatory action per se, which is the triggers. How you know that it is very important to be able to establish a working anticipatory action program, to have the trigger. It's all about forecasting. It is from the forecasting that we are able to actually see what we can do in terms of action. Without the forecasting, it's not easy. And you also know that in anticipatory action, it all started with, let's say, flash hazards, I would say, flash floods, other types of floods that are not really long lasting. So it all started with them. But yeah, and we also saw that maybe it's important to also do anticipatory action for drought. So we want to do anticipatory action for drought. But then, is it relevant, or is it the same as the kind of triggers we should have for drought, for floods? We know that drought are quite, I would say, a complex hazard, and we have discussed that in the past couple of sessions. So how best can we forecast drought? How can a given national society get to use drought forecast? This is a sort of burning question that some of you may have. And for that, we have kind of asked ourselves a couple of questions. And today's session is actually going to be a sort of dialogue, between a national meteorological service and its national society. That is, of course, anyone can play the role of the national society. I mean, any other humanitarian organization can just take the place of the national society and kind of engage in the dialogue with their national meteorological services. The idea is to kind of see how we can get the two to kind of discuss together, to engage on developing a robust drought forecasting system, which will be able to kind of inform relevant anticipatory action. And for this, we have today, and I think one of the countries where this dialogue has worked the best is Kenya. I think that Kenya has been a quite good pilot country for drought anticipatory action. In Kenya, we have a wonderful national society, a wonderful Red Cross national society, which is working fine. We also have the Kenya Meteorological Department, which is one of the most important in Africa, not just in East Africa, but in the whole of Africa. So it is very nice for us to have these two institutions speak to us today. They're joining us, I think, shortly, because internet was not that great when we were starting the meeting, but we can just check if they are now on board. Oscar, can you hear us if your internet is fine now? I can see Oscar is around, but I'm not sure if he can hear us. Can you hear us, Oscar? So Oscar is at the moment in Kenya, and he is in the same room with the Kenya Meteorological Department.
He's talking.
Oh, you can hear us, Oscar?
Yes. Oh, yes, Gigma. I was looking for the unmute button, so I was wondering anyway.
Oh, amazing. I think that in Teams, they say now that, okay, maybe we still need to unmute, but as soon as we are finished talking, there is no need to kind of mute ourselves because it is done automatically. But yeah, it is our pleasure to have you and KMD today, and would like to hear a lot from you today. Would like to hear from the experience in Kenya. How was your experience developing a trigger? What is your experience working with a typical national meteorological service? What do you think are the data that are necessary to develop a good anticipatory action? And how can we link, I would say, the forecast of drought with the observed impact on the ground? The National Society is an institution which is working on the ground, whereas the Meteorological Service is based in Nairobi, and they're doing all of the work on forecasting what is happening on the ground from the comfort of their offices. So it's not that always easy. So we'd like to hear about this experience. What are the special units that will allow a countrywide approach? What capacities are realistically needed to be able to develop a good drought trigger? I guess that we could hear more from KMD on that topic. And what have been your experiences in terms of drought impact-based forecasting? So I think these are the kind of burning questions that we already have at the moment, but we guess that throughout your presentations, other burning questions might arise. So we might be able to want to learn more from your experience. But I think people have enough heard of me. I think that the guest speaker, the star speakers of the day are Kenya Med Service and Kenya Red Cross National Society. So I would hand the ball now to Oscar, who will start by introducing himself and introducing the Kenya Meteorological Department before they can start the presentation. So the floor is all yours, Oscar.
Gigma,
Yes.
nice, nice. I mean, nice to have. I mean, to speak to this seminar. So I am not with Kenya Met. I was with my other speaker, yes, Mary Kilavi from Kenya Met, but she, I don't know, somehow the calendar was telling us that the meeting was in an hour's time, not now. So she rushed to the office in order to do this call from there. But we had developed a joint presentation. So that makes me wonder if actually we are going, because she'll be ready in the next 1 hour, she's still on road. That makes me wonder if I should do half of the presentation, then she would finish up on that.
Yeah,
or I don't know.
Yeah, I think you can start your own, and you can start even the dialogue if you want. And once she joins, I guess that she will be able to complement it.
Okay. Yeah, so apologies for that. Let me introduce myself.
And if you can also, in the meantime, also introduce Mary Kilavi, so that when she joins, she doesn't spend time again to introduce herself. Just give us a brief of what is her work, where is she working, etc.
Thank you, Gigma. So Oscarino is my name. I am a climate scientist, but I work at Kenya Red Cross, specifically supporting anticipatory action work. And yeah, and my other co-presenter is Mary Kilavi. She works for Kenya Meteorological Department. This is our national Met and our NMHS. And in there, she's in charge of communication of early warning information. So she's an assistant director in charge of communication of forecast information. And then that's actually a critical thing between. I mean, it's a strategic office which Kenya Red Cross is keen to, because of the anticipatory action work. So we'll see how communication of early warning information is actually a key ingredient or a requirement to IBF, like we'll observe shortly. So those are your two presenters. I can now load my presentation, and then I will once Mary comes in, she will add more still into the discussions around the focus information. So Gigma, I can go?
Yes, please go ahead. We are looking forward. We are excited about what you are going to tell us.
Yeah, so so as we start, let me indicate that we developed this early action protocol. We have developed the early action protocol, which was just endorsed or validated by the IFRC just in January. The beginning of this year, and that's because we took quite a number of iterations to actually fine-tune our methodology. We started by the flood EAP, which was early action protocol, which was easier to develop because of the nature of floods being a rapid onset. It's easier. To get actually a focus that is more deterministic, that is more that relates a bit well with what people know. But coming to drought being a slow onset hazard, there are lots of issues, and that made us go into quite a number of iterations. So the IBF here, of course, this being a drought seminar, I have my presentation designed along the logical steps to do anticipatory action, or our EAPs. So we have basically 7 steps, and the first 3 are actually oriented towards the things that I'm supposed to be talking about. So the first step, and actually, and by the way, this 7 steps is what the Red Cross sees as the way of doing focus-based financing, or doing early action. So I mean, to develop an early action protocol, you start the first thing by looking at doing these risk assessments, and that's the first step. Really looking back, and I mean, really looking back at the risks that face a country, and in this case, we've had to look back at the risks, and we was looking at floods and drought as the main hazards in Kenya, which cause lots of I mean, most of the time bring about crisis. And then now in this case, drought being the critical one to talk about, looking at the kind of impacts that come about with. It's about we were looking at, and now a drought brings about water scarcity, a lack of pasture for our pastoralists, because this is a major livelihood activity, and reduce crop yield. So something to do with farmers being I mean, agriculture being a major livelihood activity. So those are the kind of impacts we are thinking about. And luckily, as we talk about pasture, water issues, so we are already having indicators for that, like indications of that, the things that we can monitor and focus them. So at this point, it speaks into the kind of data that we are using, or at least focusing, or whatever it is, to put together in order to anticipate a drought. So really understanding of where these people are, and who are these people that are exposed to a drought. In Kenya, we have up to 70% of the country being an arid and semi-arid area, and this is just part of the country and which we had to focus on, and therefore, who are the most vulnerable people in there, and understanding that they are mostly pastoralists, but also we have farmers in there, and they depend on water. So these are just some of the primary things that come into mind when you talk about drought. So if we do not address them, they lead into secondary issues of conflict, issues of children dropping out of school, malnutrition, food insecurity, and all that. And therefore, the kind of looking at the primary impacts that we needed to solve, we ended up looking at these specific indicators for water, but also for pasture and farming. And at that point, we have an institution in Kenya an authority that monitors drought. I mean, is in charge of drought operations, and that authority has a way of monitoring. Therefore, they have some indicators which they have used over the years to monitor drought and inform whether the president can actually declare the country to be, drought to be an emergency or not, whatever it is. So really capturing what they are using to monitor, they use standardized precipitation index, but they also use vegetation condition index. So these are the primary data that we look at, and luckily the next step is actually where we are asking ourselves what focus information we have that we can use to anticipate these drought issues much in advance. We are having a Kenya Meteorological Department, and this is somewhere where, if Mary comes in, she will expand it a little bit. So an understanding that we have to use local information, we have to use the resource where the government is actually putting a lot of resources to ensure that we have a Kenya Meteorology department that can give us early warning information. So we had to work with Kenya Met department, looking back at the different forecasts that they offer. So here they are able to predict the standardized precipitation index. Of course, there are thresholds in there which, whenever they are met, they indicate a drought. Understanding that they predict a major rainfall seasons in Kenya, which whenever they fail, we tend to see droughts. In this case, they predict October, November, December. So we are lucky that October, November, December is a major rainfall season for this 70% of the country, the arid and semi-arid areas. And whenever this season fails, that's when we see drought events. And therefore, and luckily, this is an easier season to predict. The skill of forecast from Kenya Met for that season is a good one. So we actually looked at that kind of a focus for October, November, December for standardized precipitation index is what we look at as a hazard as our hazard information. So we look at that. They usually produce that as early as July, but with updates in August and September, just before they do a national release, a national statement for forecast information for the season. So at September, they are actually confident enough that that forecast is skillful enough to be used as to anticipate what would happen in October, November, December, and therefore in September we are able to use that information to make decisions. So they issue that forecast for the whole country in terms of probabilistic, because it's a seasonal information. Therefore, they try to package it in terms of probabilities out of the ensemble of models which they use. So the next step is an understanding now, like putting together information from the forecast information, but also with the what's happening on ground. So as I said much earlier, is we have that drought monitoring agency in Kenya, and they monitor primary drivers of a drought. So in this case, they look at vegetation conditions on ground. They have thresholds beyond which, if they are met, they indicate actually a drought is already kicking in. And beyond that, again, they monitor other indicators of impacts of drought. So as we concentrate on the primary ones, these are predictable aspects. And once these indicators on ground are telling us this condition on ground, and then Kenya Met issues a forecast that that some specific thresholds of a drought are expected to be met, then at that point we already are having an indication of where the risk information is high. So of course there's a way to do a combination of those aspects using the risk metric. To develop a risk metric from the inform metric. The inform methodology. We have some thresholds that actually capture very extreme drought events. So we have a threshold for a more frequent or a moderate drought, but also another threshold for a very frequent, for a very extreme but impactful drought event. So for us, for our EAP, we are concentrating on this extreme event, the 1 in 5 year, which is most impactful, and that is what Kenya Met department produces focus for. So that combination, we usually update our drought risk map based on the focus information, but now capturing also updated monitoring information. So again, after step number 3, then the other things are about now understanding what early actions can be implemented to tackle the primary impacts of a drought. and then these ones have been written into our Drought Early Action Protocol. So our Drought Early Action Protocol is online. You could Google Kenya Drought Early Action Protocol and you would appreciate a summary of what's in there. So those other specific discussions around early actions are not part of this discussions, and therefore I could move to the next slide where we are talking about what is needed to produce impact-based forecast. And Mary is supposed to talk about the first two, talking about the existing early warning systems, because that's a factor to consider, but also technical capacities for producers to produce, for early warning producers to produce that kind of forecast. But so Mary will allude into that. But let me start at risk monitoring point. So here, what we are saying is the mandate of our early warning producers, the people who give us forecasts which we can merge with the other information to understand what risks we are expecting with a certain lead time. They don't have a mandate to monitor, and therefore we had to look around and get this agency, the National Drought Management Authority. They monitor the risk of a drought, so they have indicators that indicate a drought event. By the way, they are the ones that contribute to IPC, these IPC classifications. In Kenya, the assessments contribute to IPC classifications. And what I wanted to say is that risk monitoring is an important component, because it gives us some kind of information which shows what's on ground, and therefore just as a quick overlay of focus information can give us an overall risk of a drought some months into this, before you get into the season. But it's beyond that, it's beyond the risk monitoring, but that data, how is that data archived and shared? And this was this point is very critical when these different departments or agencies are actually handling data. There are some other important data that we actually need, but we still can't access because the people who are in charge of that data are not maybe collecting them in a way that if they can share with us, or capturing very specific elements. So you would find, for instance, cases of food insecurity being presented as one value from the whole country. So you'd be saying, for instance, 2 million people are facing starvation or food insecure, and that's expected to reach 4 million in time after the next rainfall season, because it will only worsen. So this kind of figures, it's hard. We need a disaggregation of that. So we need spatially disaggregated data. And this is not always available, because this for these guys, it works for them. But in this specific IBF discussion, we need that to be disaggregated, so that when you want to implement your anticipatory actions, you have an understanding that it's not the whole country that is that is at risk. It's about some areas need to be prioritized and some need to be given medium, maybe. You need to get to a certain thresholds beyond which you act, and you can't act on everything. So this partial disaggregation is a specific ask from users of this of IBF. And therefore, we run into challenges at that point of implementation. Of course, they could even be having this partial disaggregating, but sharing of some information is not an open discussion. We've had this our national census, for instance, in Kenya. the authority that's in charge with collecting data, I mean census like population information, because population is critical to feeding into IBF. You need to know where people are. Of these people, you need to know who among them are practicing farming, who among them are pastoralists, who among them are have different vulnerabilities, for instance, the elderly and all that. So that demographic data is the one that is publicly available is at levels which are a bit high. For instance, we have the national information, we have district information. In Kenya we call it counties, and sub under that. So going below that information exists with our Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, but they've not made it public. The reason for that is, of course, there are some irregularities and all that, so they have not made that kind of data available. So the question of data sharing is a critical one, because it makes us either to achieve impact-based forecasting or struggle with it. So the other aspect is around communication of early warning itself, and in this case, it's about the skill. So when we started this FBF journey in Kenya, we didn't have very many decision makers appreciating the skill of focus information. When you'd tell them that you are expecting this major rainfall season to fail, and therefore we need to do ABCD as early actions. And then they would be asking you, where are you getting that information from? You're saying that you are using focus information. They would be telling you that this agency usually lies to us. But that was because they had not appreciated some key aspects. So what we've done with time is we've realized that in as much as the skill of a focus need to be communicated as part of the focus, it's also key that that these people are capacity built slowly to understand this. And what we did is we went back into an analysis to show people that there are some seasons which are not so predictable. For instance, the March, April, May, that's still a limitation of science over East Africa. But October, November, December is a good one, can be anticipated much in advance, and all those issues. So with time, it has been appreciated, and that's what's being used in impact-based forecasting. At the moment, you go in many institutions in Kenya, and you'd find them appreciating and using forecast information to take decisions. For instance, when we advocate that just before rainfall seasons, let's have Nairobi City, clearing of drainages and all that. There would be uptake of that information because people have appreciated the value of skill of forecast. So that's a critical aspect, but also other key concepts, of course. People accept right now focus information a lot because when in Kenya already, when we talk about unexpected failed season, we would be talking about the drivers and be telling them it's a La Nina year or an El Nino year, so we expect a lot of rainfall. Right now, if we say that, even among legislators, they would appreciate that. They would accept that. But back in the days, when we had not done a lot of advocacy and capacity building, people didn't know that, and therefore it was hard to expect impacts based on forecasts. So I would like to stop at that. But once my co-presenter comes in, she will allude briefly on the existing early warning systems and also technical capacities of early warning producers, because she is one of the producers. So Gigma, I would like to stop at that to allow the floor to interact.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for this brilliant presentation. I think we have so many questions, starting with even myself, but I would first maybe thank you again for this nice presentation, for this experience, and again, congratulations on the achievement on getting your EAP, your Early Action Protocol, validated. That is really amazing, and it is a still fresh document. So a lot of national societies across the Red Cross movement, but also a lot of other humanitarian organizations working on drought in both Eastern and outside of Eastern Africa. So we may want to start with the questions. I know we have like 15 minutes to go until the top of the hour, but of course, it will be possible for us to continue engaging slightly after, if people have some time to stay. So for the questions, maybe I would start with those that we have on the Slido. You obviously knew how it works. The question that gets the most votes would first go. So there is one question, and the person wants to understand the role of local actors in defining and validating the triggers that you have used. So you have worked with KMD, you have worked with the Drought agency. So we have worked with your National Med Service and your Drought agency. And of course, you have also with the community. So the specific question is pertaining to the local actors. How can they help to define and to mostly validate the triggers that you have set and that you are using? So what have been your experience on that, and maybe what could be your suggestions, how to get the local actors to work on the triggers to help define and assess the trigger? If you have already done it, fine, we'd be happy to kind of listen from your experience, to learn from your experience. But if not, if you have any recommendation, we'd also be really glad to hear it. And of course, following Kenya Red Cross, if other people from other contexts also have some experience regarding that, then we are also happy to take it. Since it is a learning series, we would like to hear from everyone. So Oscar, first, the floor is yours, and then we can complement with other participants. So what has been, how can we understand the role of local actors in defining and validating the triggers that you have used?
Thank you, Gigma, for that. Yeah, so a few things, but the main learning, well, we've done triggers also, with our actors, and they accepted and they relate it easily with what they see on ground, or also from their knowledge or whatever it is. It's because we worked with them the journey. It's about working with them to co-produce a product for them, and for us, what we did is what was critical. What was so supportive to us is the National Drought Management Authority. That authority that started a while back to monitor drought issues. So we plugged into what's already existing, and remember that one of the greatest users of drought early warning information. So taking the thresholds that they are already using, they have some stages of in their drought early warning cycle. Their system of monitoring. They have what they call the biophysical indicators. These are the first thing that drives actually a drought. It's about lack of rainfall, but also vegetation drying out. So that could also be an indicator of other types of drought, not only meteorological. It could be hydrological, it could be something else, even if you monitor water levels and all that. So for them, they look at a vegetation condition, they look at precipitation. So there are specific thresholds for monitoring that. And that's what we borrowed for our EAP. Of course, there are other in their system. They have these other indicators. They look at how people are already being impacted. They'll be measuring the gum rate. if for the health people in the house, they'll be monitoring gum rate, mid upper arm circumference. These are globally, these are ways of monitoring how people are being, food insecure. How people are being impacted by drought. So before people get before people get to die, they have, you get to points where you see people getting emaciated, so there are some things to monitor from people. So all that. So basically what I'm saying is we borrowed thresholds from what's already being used. If that wasn't the case, then you'd have to interrogate this kind of, this data, of course, indicators of drought, of course, quantifying drought, we know of SPI, but VCI and many other indicators, but you'd have to interrogate all this and see which one can be used on ground, but also which of these are forecasted, where do we have capacity to work with them, do we have capacity to produce this kind of products? And that speaks into actually the number one point that you are seeing on my screen. It's about the early warning systems. What is it we have capacity to produce? So I would have to look at SPI, look at how if it captures this important, years in which we had drought issues and all that. But in this case, we were a bit lucky because this organization already had collected a little of that. So two things I can say. Looking at where the capacities that are already there, but also looking at a specific thresholds that capture specific issues on ground. So that actually users can make sense of. So that when you develop a trigger and it speaks on to already what's ongoing. So after that, if you need if you take this to a validation exercise, we had a technical working group which we are working on, and it entails stakeholders who work on drought issues. And when we were doing this analysis and presenting unto them, guys were actually accepting and saying that, oh yeah, this is capturing areas where we know there are drought issues there and all that. But also when we go to implementation level, because in Kenya, these EAPs are national, so they pick the early warning system, actually, the IBF system picks whenever there is an area, an extensive area in Kenya, which shows that the risk gets to, it's so extreme that, a high risk is expected into the season. And when you go to implementation, you go to that area, then there are some, it's again another level of an understanding, assessing and understanding within this area. Is it the whole area that's at risk? Of course, no. There are areas that are a bit wet than others and all that. So we have to, again, package very specific products at implementation level. In Kenya, they're called counties. They would be district in any other country or whatever it is. But at that point, again, we have very tailor-made forecasts at that point. And we merge that with local information, local knowledge. This is another whole ball game because we have these indigenous people who understand their context, and they can actually anticipate problems. They have indicators, and they have also, with a good lead time, they can anticipate issues. So at that point, again, you see, you have to work with them, understand, does this speak into what you're already seeing, and so that you have a harmonized understanding around what you expect for the season before you can start advocating for some things to be done. So we are lucky that a drought has a slow onset, and therefore you have a bit more time to do a bit more consultations with the community and all that. Gigma, I'd like to take it back to you.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Well, we would have liked to kind of elaborate more on that and maybe ask others to also share their experience, but we might need to kind of move on, actually, because we want to also touch on other questions for discussions. So I think we might go ahead for another question. There are quite so many. So, and some are kind of repetitive of what we have just asked. So maybe I have a question specifically for you regarding your experience working with your National Meteorological Service. So it is a question that was posted, and I think the vote is also quite high. So do you have any sort of recommendation for other national societies which might want to work with the national the own national hydromet services? Because as you probably know, I think that in the context of Eastern Africa and of Eastern Africa, I've shared experience with other national societies like Uganda, like Ethiopia, and you know that collaboration has not always been smooth. So do you have some tips that these national societies could also use to make sure that they have a good collaboration with the national hydrological or meteorological services?
Yes, Gigma. Yeah, so really working with the net, with these producers of early warning information, you first of all need to start with them, engaging them from the onset, because you'd be making very specific asks from them. If you need, I mean, to increase your lead time, I mean, the window of opportunity actually to do early actions, you need focused information. If that's possible, or if these are the kind of asks you'll be making to the producers of early on information, then you need to start engaging with them much earlier, so that you package this product, both of you in tandem, like working closely with them. So that means that the value of what you are doing has to be embedded from the onset, right away from when you start. I know you can use other global products, of course, or other monitoring information, which is globally available. For instance, these IPC classifications, you could use that. You could use that to do your early actions for drought, but also global products such as these are the even indicators such as the El Ninos and La Ninas. These indices can be used directly into an IBF for drought. But there's need to work with the local products, because as we've seen, the scale of of your actions, I mean at implementation level, you will need to go to the ground, and therefore you need very localized products. And at this point, that's why you now have to start working with the localized institution for Kenya Meteorology Department. So basically, basically you need to start engaging these NMHSs much early, and working with them for on what is possible, and not only this slide here. It's about what's available and what's the menu of this focus that's available for you to pick from. Yeah, in as much as there could be need to do slight tweaking or fine tuning to ensure that it captures the specific aspects that you're asking for, but you need to, you need to also work with, to be flexible enough to work with what's available. So you could add other layers of iterations in your implementation of early actions to ensure that you cover up for what could be, say, a low skill focus. For instance, if an NMHS is producing focus that is of low skill, there are some other clever tweaks of how to go around. For instance, if there are some seasons that are more predictable than others, you could need to work with that. But also, if not, then maybe in some months you may need to work with them with the monitoring information. But for others, you may need to again move into now high cost, high regret actions to work with very skilled information and all that. So you can stagger your actions. You can you can use you can add another quality check by using focusing, observed information or systems into that, so that this is a product that's accepted by the NMHSs. They see that the value of what they have, but also yourself, you're having a system that is anticipatory. Over, Digma.
Yeah, Oscar, that's very tricky indeed. And yeah, I really want to kind of strengthen this last point, indeed, to stress this last point. It is indeed important to make sure that the National Med Service is involved in your program, regardless of, I would say, how accurate the forecasts are, because in case of, because of the need for sustainability, you always need to make sure that the National Med Service is involved. And you know that this is also a way for you to kind of help promote whatever they are doing and also help supporting the capacity building. I might have one good question for you as well, because you actually started a bit upon it when you're giving this answer. You said that it is maybe good to see what are the seasons where the forecasts are the most important, etc. And I have this question for you from the chat. You said in particular in Kenya, and I would say in the whole of the Horn of Africa, the October to December, the short range season is much more predictable than the other season, the long range. So there is one that I would like to ask whether for your specific case and for this early action protocol that you have just submitted to the validation committee, that you have just got validated by the validation committee, have you only used the forecast for the OND season, or do you have a 2 or even 3-phased figures using different kind of forecast and or observation? So how have you kind of dealt with the less skillful season, which is the MAM season? What have you done concretely to get around of the kind of shortcomings when it comes to forecast skill? Over.
Yes, thank you, Gigma. So basically what we used, so we placed our high regret, high cost actions on that skill, that important season, one that we have longer lead time to work with, but also the skill of focus is good. So we placed nearly everything to start around July in our calendar, our seasonal calendar. Most things start around July, but there are some readiness actions, and not readiness, but prepositioning actions that start after we've seen, within March, April, thereabout. So they start early in the year, and they are based on, what are they based on? They are based on seasonal performance. So there are usually these assessments for the season, ones that actually inform the IPC classifications. These assessments in a country come after rainfall season. So in Kenya, we usually have one in May, after March, April, May season. Actually, those assessments are actually published in June, and therefore there are some preposition actions that begin with that monitoring information. So an assessment is basically a monitoring information, and some actually begin early in the year, because as long as if something is prepositions, for instance, to support wash sector, we need to procure tanks. So that procurement, as long as we don't have a tank, we've not procured a tank, we can buy it in the beginning of the year. It doesn't matter whether it will be a drought year or not, because if it's there, it can stay there for 5 years, or even 10 years and all that. So some actions, prepositioning actions, are as early as March, based on because they are low regret actions. But some now start in around June with the assessment information. This is when we start making engagements with them, with the suppliers, and so that we lessen the procurement, the length of that procurement process takes. So we start around June. So we just have bilateral agreements with suppliers and all that, so that if the trigger is met in July, when the Kenya Met forecast is issued, we are able to quickly implement these actions. We already have agreements with suppliers. We just get what we need to procure in terms of, say, the specific seeds that we need support with people so that they can plant during that period for farmers. So it's easier for us to implement those actions. Over, Gigma.
Thank you very much, Oscar. We know that we are actually at the top of the hour, but one special announcement is that Mary Kilavi is finally around. She is here and we have the pleasure to listen to her. However, conscious of the time, I think that everyone who has another kind of engagement, another commitment can, of course, go ahead, but we'll try to kind of extend this session until at least 30 minutes. So we are going to use the next 30 minutes to also hear a bit from the perspective of the forecasting agency. What is it in terms of drought trigger? And also we are going to continue with the series of questions. I have one particular question for you already, Mary Kilavi. I know that we are set to hear from you, but we already have some questions for you and I've taken it right from the chat, so it's not my own. So we know that we are supporting communities, and we also know that these communities already have their way of forecasting drought, of preparing for drought. So the question at the end of your presentation is, how do we, or how can we integrate this local and indigenous knowledge? So this is the question for you, but of course, we'll first listen from what you have first prepared for us for this session. So welcome, Mary, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, and sorry, I think we got the timing wrong. I don't know how far, I've just joined, I don't know how far Oscar had explained, but I was to talk through the information that we provide to support FBF as Kenya Met. That just started in 2020. It had earlier been piloted in a few counties, in at least one county, then scaled up to seven other counties in the Asal region. And now we are providing it for the whole country. And this is really focused of SPI, the probability of exceeding the thresholds that have already been set by the National Drought Management Authority early warning system. They have two thresholds, one for the one that signals a shift from normal to alert, and another one that is more severe, that signals a shift from alert to alarm worsening. So we provide these forecasts, the probability of exceeding those set thresholds. And along with that, we provide the skill information that is in terms of the rock scores. And at least for a few counties that we have piloted, of how to use the skill information, we've gone as far as helping them to determine what are the false alarm rates for the system, the forecasting system, for those two thresholds, the false alarm rate, such that they're able to work, or at least they should be able to work with that information to determine whether they should take action depending on the tolerance of false alarm for any of the actions that early actions that they choose to take. So we provide that, the information is provided, as I think Oscar had already mentioned, at an earlier lead time than what routinely KMD had been providing before the release of the official forecasts. and that's in July, and then it is updated every month up to September. So with the updates, then they're able to keep track of what actions need to be taken depending on the probabilities. Yeah, thank you. That's the information that we provide. Hello.
Thank you very much, Mary Kilavi.
Hello, Gigma.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, amazing. So thank you very much for this sharp and focused introduction to the work you have done with the KMD. It is very interesting. We have, as I said, already many questions waiting for you. And I think we could start with what I initially put, that is the integration of local and indigenous knowledge. How can we do that? Because we know that there is a benefit in doing so. We know that when we integrate that, the communities would embrace more whatever action we would like them to take, because they are confident that the knowledge is also being considered. So at the level of KMD, or maybe also at the level of KRC, of Kenya Red Cross, how do you think we can integrate this indigenous knowledge into our kind of scientific or modern drought forecasting systems? Have you had any kind of experience with that? Have you engaged somehow with the communities regarding this question?
Personally, not much, but the arrangement that we have at KMD is that the services have been decentralized to county level, and in at least quite a few of the counties, they have that local knowledge, that indigenous knowledge. When I served in one, it was in the capital city, so there wasn't much indigenous knowledge. But what happens is that during the release of the forecast, first the forecast is downscaled to the counties, and then we have what we call participatory scenario planning, and that is when all the stakeholders, including community representatives, are come together to consider the forecast. So usually in counties where they have indigenous knowledge, the indigenous forecasters are also invited, and they give their views. And just by virtue of that, they sort of, in a way, we get buy-in for the information that we send. We discuss the information with them, and they reach sort of a compromise in terms of what can be taken in from the indigenous knowledge. And the advisories are developed together, and what's included is also what would be the coping capacities within whichever context. So the advisories are developed based on, of course, the scientific information and a bit of the local knowledge that can be useful.
Amazing, nice experience, I would say. I also know that, and of course, we are also open to other suggestions. I know that in Uganda, they have also tried somehow to see how the natural indicators, let's say, the empirical indicators used by the local communities to forecast drought are actually driven by some scientific processes. I know that they said, for example, in one specific region of Uganda, which I can't really recall what it was, but they said that there, for example, they were kind of listening to the sound of the wind in a mountain, and for a given season when the sound is particularly lower than usual, they would expect less rains that season, because the gods, I would say, are kind of not very happy with the behavior of the humans. And when the scientists came, they realized that actually this decrease in the sound is actually associated also with the decrease in the speed of the wind. And what this means is that actually there was not enough transport of moisture in the region, meaning that we also had less rainfall, leading then to a drought. And so this was how they were able to kind of pick it on from what the local indicators were saying, to kind of combine it with the scientific information that they have. So they're kind of been able to mix them. So it is indeed always good to just use this experience that KMD has just shared, also trying to bring as many as possible, let's say, people who know about this traditional knowledge to the various community engagement that we do in anticipatory action. Mary, okay, is there any other experience on that you would like to share? Otherwise, we have a couple of other questions for Mary. I know we have only now 15 minutes left, but we can take one more experience on this indigenous knowledge because it is quite important. There is a question for you, Oscar. Kenya Red Cross has done a study on indigenous knowledge on drought forecast. It is from Caroline. She thinks Kenya Red Cross has done it. So has this been published, or do you have somehow made public the results of that study, Oscar? Or would Dorothy would like to? Okay, please go ahead, Oscar.
Yes, Gigma, thanks. We've not published that work yet, but one is in pipeline. So we are doing 3 papers out of that. So the first paper is actually just publishing what those local knowledge, those indicators are. So it's a catalog of the kind of local indicators are, because we have some specific ways of defining what local knowledge is. Of course, it has to be different from magic. Of course, in many other parts of these countries, when you go there, you'd be told some things that are actually magic, because someone can pass rainfall, that person can claim to create rainfall and all that, and they cannot be scientifically, they don't have a scientific backing. But this generally what we call local knowledge are things that you can relate with actually science, and it's actually part of Gigma what you are saying, that if they make sense, then scientists are happy with it. We can quickly use it. So we have a catalog of that. That's a paper actually I'm leading with the 510 team of Netherlands Red Cross, and there's another paper on a case study of where we are using that within the window of opportunity. How how can that really inform anticipatory action? We are careful because in anticipatory action, we like talking about thresholds and very specific things about interrogations of a forecast information. And for local knowledge, you can't really place them. You can't place those kind of strict criteria on local knowledge. So you wouldn't really be talking about skill, for instance, because that local person will always cannot give you a hindcast or a historical story of how it has been, so that you match that. So some of these things you get to become a little open to them, so that you also bring that acceptability between what scientists are telling and also what the community know. So it doesn't, like, this very stringent questions around it cannot be asked on local knowledge, but there is a lot of value to use local knowledge, because most of the time, again, we are getting a good convergence. Because, by the way, you can imagine that even for seasons which we do not have very good skill in focus information, these guys still give very useful information that they actually point out very important things in the among the communities that actually come to pass. So so we are careful to when we are using local knowledge in this context. Gigma was okay. Or have I answered the question of whether we've published or not? Yeah, we are the case study that is on Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia is actually in pipeline. And do we have Dorothy? Yeah, so it's
Yes,
in
she's in. Dorothy would like to comment a little bit on the experience you are trying to publish with IRP.
Not really. Sorry, Oscar. I didn't mean to steal the thunder. No, we so the case studies have been finalized, and I think they're about ready to be put online. So anyone who's interested, please just pop your emails in the chat, and as soon as they're online, I'll make sure to circulate them as well.
That is nice. So, Mary, they still have some questions for you. There was one in French. I would like to kind of translate it into English. There is this issue, and it is not just for Mary, it's also for you, Oscar. And I think this is really a great experience that you have had in Eastern Africa. The issue was about the consecutive years of drought. How do you deal with them? I mean, when you have 2 or 3 years that where you see drought keep coming, so you always forecast drought coming. So how do you kind of work around these issues? How do you make sure that you have resources to kind of bring anticipation to all of them if it is still anticipation? That is the question. How do we kind of break this cycle of drought anticipation where we in the situations where we already are in the drought itself? I know it's a quite tough question. I'm not sure if it is KMD or Kenya Met or Kenya Red Cross that should take it. But yeah, the question is here. So how do we deal with it?
Maybe I can start as Mary and mutes herself. Well, this is, I would agree that this is now the limitation. This is where we are at because it's a research question. Gigma, what you've asked is a research question, but a bit of that is what we are saying, that we need to merge also some monitoring information with the focus information. It's not do not only act whenever focus only picks these issues. So some of these actions are actually picked in monitoring information, and just an understanding of the kind of lead time that you have to implement some actions, so that whatever is already being, whatever is being expected does not get to a peak without you doing anything, is actually something that we do here. So what you are saying, Gigma, is an aspect which you've observed in East Africa is that, and in Kenya specifically, is these droughts, they become such a problem when 2 successive or consecutive rainfall seasons have not behaved. So when we have that October, November, December, which is the major, this is rainfall that's concentrated to the eastern Kenya. The dry part of Kenya is towards north and eastern, and when that area does not, when October, November, December doesn't behave as much, then it's a problem for them. So if that season misbehaves and then the March, April, May also fails, then that leads us into drought years. Actually, most of those cases have ended up being declared. The government have declared them drought emergencies because at that point we have lots of issues, food insecurity and many other aspects. So so those consecutive rainfall, failed rainfall seasons, remember that our focus from Kenya Met target, this long lead focus only for 1 season. So with focus itself, we do not have this for 2 seasons, so we can plan with 1 forecast for both seasons. But we can get already indications of a bad next season. For instance, right now for March, April, May, just by monitoring the sea surface temperatures, this El Nino, La Nina systems actually give some level of indication of what the following season would be. but we've not included those indications into our early action protocols. However, what we try so much to do is we've staggered our early actions in a way that some of actions can actually be implemented by monitoring information, but they are low regret actions. So I think I'm mixing two things. So I'm talking about a focus, but a limitation of our focus to use them in this scenario. But a sidestep, how we are sidestepping that is by trying to use also monitoring information to anticipate, so that if you're anticipating something a bit worse off, then there are some low regret actions that we can do. And remember that this is the current situation where we are in it. We're already in a drought, but we are talking about the window of opportunity to do anticipatory actions. Do we even have it? Then we would be appreciating that there's some things that can be done, some that can still not be done. So I think I'll allow Mary also to speak into this. Gigma.
Yeah, please, Mary, would you mind being brief, because I still have one good question for you actually. So please go ahead first.
Okay, maybe I speak about where we capture that in the focus information. At least we tried to do that during this last season, sorry, O&D 2022. We tried to capture the monitored information on the forecasts by the way we displayed it, in terms of by actually overlaying it on the forecast by indicating, for example, the counties that were in various stages, either in alarm or in alert, indicating them on the map, and then showing the probability of them, deteriorating by giving the forecast probabilities of the various thresholds. So in a sense, we're trying to show what would be the cumulative effect as to what is expected given the current situation. So that's the best we have been able to do as far as capturing both what's happening on the ground and what is expected.
Great. Thank you very much. And this last question I have for you, I think it is time for us to wrap up, but this one final question for you. We have already put it to Kenya Red Cross, but we'd like also to hear it from your perspective. So how was the experience working with a non-technical agency like Kenya Red Cross Society, or in a broader sense, how is the experience working with humanitarians? Do you feel that it is complex? What are the challenges you have faced when you are working with the Kenya Red Cross Society? And do you have any recommendation for other national med services who would also like to start working with the national Red Cross societies?
I think for us, it's been a little like almost a walk in the park, because we have like at the Kenya Red Cross, we have people like Lino, at least a few who are meteorologists. So they understand us, they understand the information really well, and they've been able to work like sort of liaison to translate the information better for us. And that has helped quite a lot. Otherwise, when you're talking to people who do not have any background on climate information, then it's a real struggle, because you really have to go to great lengths to translate the information first, to sort of capacity build them on the terms that we use, some concepts, some as simple as even just probability, and that becomes really difficult. But because of having climate scientists in Kenya Red Cross, that has made things a lot easier for us.
Thank you very much for this experience indeed. And I see loves, hearts from the roti indeed. We really love to hear such experience sharing. Unfortunately, we have reached our time, so I'll just hand over again to Karen, who introduced our session, to again wrap it up and let us know what is next for us in our learning series.
I'm very happy to. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Gigma, for this very interesting session and learnings from Kenya. Thanks a lot. I'm happy to see so many people still on the call. So in 2 weeks, we want to talk about complex forecasting. So we want to look into impact-based forecasting and what else apart from like the meteorological forecast. What do we need to add to do a good impact-based forecast? So what do we need to integrate in terms of vulnerability and exposure, and how do we bring this physical hazard forecast together with other information? And how complicated can it be? How complicated does it have to be? So we want to explore this and try to find the balance of what is the information we need to have, but also not overcomplicating things. And we will hear from Madagascar in 2 weeks' time. So stay tuned for that. And thanks everybody again for joining in. Thanks again to the speakers, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.